Sienna Vale did not cry when her husband handed her the divorce papers. She read them twice, set them on the kitchen counter beside her coffee, and asked if he wanted her to be out before the weekend. That was the part Owen never talked about afterward. That she did not beg. That she did not raise her voice. That she folded the papers back into their envelope with the same calm she used when she reviewed contracts, and she simply asked him a logistical question the way she always had, the way he had always taken for granted. He said yes, before the weekend would be fine. Owen Hale, 43 years old and co-owner of Hale & Mercer Construction, had built his name on a particular kind of confidence, the kind that fills a room before the man does. He had broad shoulders and a handshake that contractors remembered, and he had spent 17 years building Hale & Mercer from a two-man renovation outfit in Barrie into one of the most recognized mid-sized construction firms in central Ontario. He was proud of that. He reminded people of it often. He had also spent the last 8 months telling Sienna that she was the problem. Not in those exact words. Owen was too careful for that. What he said was that she was distant, that she had changed, that they wanted different things now, that he felt like a stranger in his own marriage. What he did not say was that her name was Claudette, that she was 29, that she worked in the permit office at the city, and that Owen had been driving 40 minutes out of his way 3 times a week for the past 7 months to stop in and see her. Sienna knew. She had known since February, but she had not said anything, because she was in the middle of something, and she needed time. Owen did not know about the something. That was the thing about Owen. He had stopped asking her about her work years ago. Around the same time he started thinking of her salary as secondary income and her opinions as background noise. She was a landscape architect. She had a small firm, Sienna said whenever people asked, said it quietly, with a modest smile, the way she had learned to say it around Owen's family, because the Hales did not think much of landscape architecture. They built things with steel and concrete. What Sienna did was, in Douglas Hale's words, plant flowers for rich people. She had learned to make herself smaller at family dinners. She had learned to change the subject when someone asked what project she was working on. She had learned to answer her phone in the car, or in the bathroom, or anywhere that wasn't a room where Owen might overhear and realize that the woman he'd decided to leave was not quite who he thought she was. The story properly started 4 years earlier, in a glass-walled boardroom in Toronto, when Sienna Wren, she had kept her name for professional use. Owen hadn't noticed, was brought in as the lead designer on a 40-acre mixed-use development outside of Guelph. The project was called Ashwood Common. The developer was a company called Crestline Group, and the woman who ran it was Tamsin Cole, 58 years old, silver-haired, sharp in the manner of someone who has spent decades being underestimated and long since decided to use it. Tamsin had been introduced to Sienna's work through a public park commission in Collingwood. She had driven 2 hours to see it in person. She had stood at the center of the main pathway, which curved through a restored wetland and opened onto a hill that caught the sunset in a specific and deliberate way. And she had called Sienna directly from that hill to tell her she wanted her for Ashwood. Sienna had been in her car in the parking lot of a grocery store in Barrie when the call came. She remembered thinking she should go back and get the eggs she had forgotten. She did not go back for the eggs. She sat in the car for 20 minutes after the call ended, not moving. Ashwood Common was not a project. It was a defining thing. The kind of commission that an architect carries through her career, like a proof of concept. Over the following 3 years, Sienna restructured her firm quietly, hired 3 new people, and partnered with Crestline on 2 adjacent parcels of land that Tamsin had been sitting on for a decade, waiting for the right collaboration. By the time Owen handed her the divorce papers in March, those parcels, formerly held through a numbered company that Sienna had incorporated 4 years ago on the advice of her accountant, were worth considerably more than Hale & Mercer Construction. Sienna had not told Owen any of this, not because she was hiding it, because he had never asked. She moved into a furnished rental in Guelph. It was a clean, quiet apartment above a bookstore on a street lined with maple trees that were just beginning to bud. She put her one good fern by the window and made the bed with sheets she had bought at a shop on the way over, and she sat on the edge of the mattress in the first real silence she had had in 17 years and thought, okay, just that, okay. Owen, she was told through their respective lawyers, had already moved Claudette into the house. There had apparently been some renovation planned, a kitchen update, and Owen had consulted someone from Claudette's cousin's contracting business about the quote. It was, by all accounts, a seamless transition. Owen's mother, Paulette Hale, 71 years old, and a woman who had disapproved of Sienna from the start in the specific way of mothers who cannot bear to see their sons choose someone self-contained, had apparently been very helpful with the move. She had brought casseroles. she had selected new throw pillows. She had stood in the kitchen Sienna had lived in for 12 years and told Claudette that the place felt warmer already. Sienna heard this from a mutual friend. She received the information with no visible response. What she was actually doing that week was finalizing the development agreement for the second Ashwood parcel. 22.4 acres that Crestline was developing into a mixed residential community with a central greenway that Sienna had designed over the course of 8 months. The project had attracted attention from the Ontario planning community and quietly from several investment groups who had been watching Crestline's land strategy with considerable interest. One of those groups had been in conversation with Tamsin for several months. Their interest extended beyond Ashwood. They wanted a development partner for a larger portfolio of projects across southern Ontario, residential, mixed use, some light commercial. And they had been doing due diligence not only on Crestline's financials, but on the underlying design and architecture partnerships that gave the projects their value. Sienna's name had come up in those conversations more than once. In early April, Tamsin called her. "There is a structure being discussed," Tamsin said, "that I think you should hear about." Hale and Mercer's trouble had not started with Owen. It had started 2 years earlier, when Owen's business partner, Ray Mercer, had pushed hard for them to take on a large commercial contract in Sudbury without sufficient due diligence on the client's financing. The client had defaulted partway through. The legal dispute had cost them considerably. They had covered it at the time by drawing on a line of credit and on Owen's personal capital, and Ray had restructured his share in a way that left Owen holding more of the liability. Owen had not told Sienna any of this, not because he was hiding it. He simply had not thought she would understand. By the following spring, Hale and Mercer was operating at a level of debt that made their next large contract essential. They needed a project big enough to restore their credit position and give them the credibility to refinance. Owen had been in conversation with several potential clients, including a municipal infrastructure project in Simcoe County and a private developer who was acquiring land along the 400 corridor for a new residential build. That private developer was a subsidiary of the same investment group that was in conversations with Tamsin Cole and Crestline. Sienna did not know this when Tamsin called her in April. She found out in May when the group's primary contact, a composed, deliberate woman named Teresa Owusu, who wore the same style of flat leather shoes every time they met and had a habit of letting silences run longer than was comfortable, laid out the full picture over lunch in a restaurant on King Street in Toronto. The group, Teresa explained, was consolidating several development interests under a unified structure. They were bringing Crestline in as a planning and development partner. They were bringing Sienna's firm in as the design lead, and they were separately reviewing a shortlist of construction contractors for the residential builds. Hale and Mercer was on that shortlist. Sienna set down her fork. "I see," she said. Teresa watched her for a moment. "Is that a problem?" Sienna picked up her water glass and looked at the light coming through it. "No," she said. "I just need to understand the process clearly." She understood it very clearly. The investment group would be selecting contractors through a formal RFP process. They were not choosing based on relationships. They were choosing based on financial stability, capacity, and track record. Hale and Mercer would submit with everyone else. If they were chosen, the contract would go through at arm's length. If they were not chosen, the work would go to someone else. Sienna was not part of the contractor selection. She was the design lead. Structurally, she had no decision-making role in that component. She did, however, know things that Owen did not. She did not call Owen. She had not spoken to Owen since the lawyers had exchanged their initial correspondence. She had no obligation to call him, and she did not. She did call her own lawyer, a clear-eyed woman named Sandra, who had been with her since the early days of her firm and who received the full situation over the phone with the steady quiet of someone taking notes. "You have no conflict," Sandra said when Sienna finished. "I know I don't," Sienna said. "I just wanted to say it out loud to someone." "You have no conflict," Sandra said again. "Your role is design. You are not selecting contractors. You are not advising the group on their shortlist. You are doing your job." "Yes," Sienna said. "Do your job," Sandra said. The RFP results came back in June. Hale and Mercer was not selected. The contract went to a firm from Hamilton that had a stronger financial position and a better insurance record. Owen found out on a Thursday afternoon. Sienna found out the same way she found out everything now, through channels that had nothing to do with Owen. A brief note from Teresa. Business clean and forward moving. She was told later, by the mutual friend, who occasionally kept her informed of things she had not asked about, that Owen had not taken it well, that he had called someone at the investment group, that he had been apparently quite loud about the fact that he knew people inside the project and that there were things worth discussing. that the person he spoke to had listened and had then made a note and had then done nothing. The mutual friend also told her that Paulette had been at the Hale and Mercer office for most of that week. That Ray had cleared out a significant portion of his personal stake several months earlier, which Owen was now discovering for the first time. That Claudette had apparently asked, twice now, when they would be looking at houses in a different neighborhood. Sienna heard all of this. She let it sit. She thought of something Tamsin had said to her once, early in the Ashwood project, when they were walking the site in rubber boots through the March mud, and Sienna had pointed out a low spot in the land where water collected. You could fight the water, Tamsin had said, looking at it, or you could let it go where it already wants to go. They had built a pond there. It became the centerpiece of the whole design. The moment happened in September. It was a Tuesday which felt wrong somehow. Moments like this should arrive on stormier days, more cinematic, but it was a clear Tuesday in September and the maples on Sienna's street were just beginning to turn. There was a groundbreaking ceremony at the Ashwood Common parcel. Teresa's group had organized it, low-key but attended by some people in the Ontario real estate and planning community who had been watching the project. There were site plans on an easel. There was a photographer. There was a woman from the city who gave a brief speech about responsible development. Sienna was there as design lead, which meant she was introduced, which meant she was standing near the front when the small crowd moved through the tent toward the refreshment table afterward. Owen was also there. He had come with Ray, who had apparently been trying to salvage some connection to the project. There were subcontracting possibilities that Ray was still pursuing, and he had attended as a gesture of goodwill to the group's site manager. Owen had tagged along. He had not been told who would be there, or if he had been told, he had not processed the information. He saw her from across the tent. She watched his face go through 3 different things in approximately 4 seconds. Recognition, confusion, something she did not have a word for. She did not change her expression. She was in the middle of a conversation with Teresa and a planner from the city, and she did not step away from it. Owen came over. This was later described by 2 different people who witnessed it as a miscalculation. Sienna, he said. Owen, she said. There was a pause. Teresa and the planner from the city did not step away, because they had not been introduced to Owen and had no reason to understand that they were witnessing anything other than 2 people who knew each other. Owen looked around the tent, at the easels with the site plans, at the group signage. He looked back at Sienna. I didn't know you were involved in this, he said. Yes, Sienna said. Since when? Teresa, who had excellent instincts and had known Sienna for 4 years, chose this moment to turn slightly towards Sienna and say, should I introduce your colleague to the full project scope? I believe he may not have the context. Sienna glanced at her. She looked at Owen. He knows enough. She did not say, I have been design lead on this project for 3 years. The first parcel is complete. My firm is the primary design partner on the whole portfolio. She did not say, the numbered company that holds the land rights on the second parcel is mine. She did not say any of it because he could read. The signage was right behind him. Owen read the signage. He turned back to her. This is yours, he said. Not a question. Professionally, yes, she said. He stood there for a moment in the way a person stands when they have walked through a door expecting a room and found instead a completely different building. How long? He said. The Ashwood Commission? 4 years. The partnership structure with Crestline? 3. The numbered company has been incorporated since the same year. He was quiet. The same year, he repeated. Yes. He looked at her the way he had looked at her very rarely in their marriage, the way he looked when he was not calculating, not positioning, not managing the room. Just looking. You never said anything, he said. You never asked, she said. She did not make a scene of it. She did not need to. The tent was small, the moment was complete, and she had a conversation to return to. Owen left shortly after with Ray. She heard the car. She stood with Teresa and the planner from the city for another 40 minutes, talking about the Greenway corridor and the naturalization plan for the east edge of the site, where a remnant hedgerow was being preserved and integrated into the design. She was precise and present and genuinely interested in the conversation. On the drive home, she stopped at the grocery store on the edge of town, the one near the highway with the wide parking lot and the reliable produce section. She bought the eggs she had forgotten in February. The months that followed were not dramatic, which was in a way the most honest thing about them. Owen and Ray restructured Hale and Mercer. Some of the debt was managed, some of it was not. The Hamilton firm completed the first residential phase of the Ashwood portfolio on schedule and under budget, which reflected well on the whole project. Teresa's group announced 2 additional parcels in the spring. Claudette, Sienna was told, had moved out of the Hale house by December. This was relayed without commentary and received in the same spirit. Paulette Hale had reportedly stopped calling the house the way she had before, which was frequently and with opinions. Whether this was related to the events of September or simply the natural adjustment of a woman recalibrating her sense of the family's standing, Sienna did not know and did not spend much time wondering. Owen called once. In October, a brief call, businesslike in the way that men sometimes become businesslike when they don't know what register to use. He said he had been thinking. He said he hadn't known. He said he thought maybe they could talk. Sienna listened to all of it. "I believe you didn't know," she said. That was always the honest part. He didn't say anything for a moment. "Was it that simple?" he finally asked. "Not simple," she said, "but yes." She wished him well and meant it, and she hung up, and she made dinner in her kitchen above the bookstore with the maple trees outside just losing their last leaves, the autumn coming in through a window she left open because she had discovered, in the months alone, that she liked the cold air in the evenings. The fern by the window had never looked better. There is a particular kind of woman who has been taught to take up less space, in rooms, in conversations, in the careful management of what she discloses about herself, because the people nearest to her had long ago decided that what she did was secondary, that her work was a pleasant hobby, that her ambitions were modest, because she did not announce them loudly. Sienna had been that woman for 17 years in the same house, at the same table, with the same family looking through her like a window. She had not planned any of it as a correction. She had simply built things quietly, the way she always had, because the work was good and the land was there, and she understood instinctively how to find the low places where the water already wanted to go. The name on the Ashwood project belonged to her. It had always belonged to her. She just hadn't needed anyone to know it yet.